And then because he mentions Maryam, he then goes to talk about Maryam. وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ مَرْيَمَ. And then he starts talking about Maryam. How it is that she grew up in that place and she was a pure person. And eventually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose her to be the means for delivering Nabi Isa alayhi salam to the world, Jesus. And then because he mentioned Jesus, he starts talking about Nabi Isa alayhi salam and what happened to him. And then after that, he starts talking about another prophet, وَاذْكُرْ فِي الْكِتَابِ Ibrahim. He's keen on us knowing about Nabi Abraham. And then after Ibrahim, he talks about Ishaq, and then Yaqub, and then Musa, and then Ismail, and then Idris. Some of these people he mentions a whole page for. Some of them he just mentions their name. But it seems that he's very keen on us knowing that these people were individuals and they're worth remembering. They achieved something. And then he talks about them as a whole group. He says these were the people who were the prophets and the followers of the prophets, and they followed the message, and they were always praying, and they were always in prostration, and they would cry in remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if you look at how many people Allah has mentioned until now, relative to the number of people who have ever existed in this world, it's a very small percentage, correct? We just mentioned a handful of people and their followers. A very small percentage. And then after all these pages, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes one statement which encompasses the rest of the folks. He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فخلف من بعدهم خلف أضاعوا الصلاة واتبعوا الشهوات فسوف يلقون غيا. As for the rest of the folks, I'm going to describe them in one line. This is their story. Their story is there are people who didn't pray. Okay, they didn't care about the laws. They went their own way. And they followed their desires, their passions. And these people, they're not really worth mentioning. They're going to meet aimlessness in life. They don't have any purpose. So you see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing all these individuals. He's taking care to mention them by name, their story. And suddenly when he comes to the vast majority of people, he just mentions them in one line and then he goes away. Why? Because, brothers and sisters, have you heard the story of the person who's obsessed with becoming rich, and the goal in his life is just to gain as much money as possible? Well, I've heard that story. I think you've heard that story too. And guess what? His life isn't very interesting. It's not really worth mentioning or talking about. What happened to him? Well, he never really met the goal of his life. He never really found happiness. Or have you heard the story of that person who wanted to dominate, wanted to control, wanted to become, he just was hungry for power. He was obsessed with power. His story wasn't very interesting either, was it? Because he didn't really do anything. At the end of the day, he just died. He didn't leave a legacy. What about the story of that person who pursued his lusts? Just hungry for his lusts. Looking everywhere he wants to look at, making interaction with everyone he wants to make interaction with. What happened to that person? Well, their story isn't very interesting either. You see, brothers and sisters, people who don't take the path of Islam, they're never able to raise their head out of the sand and show that they actually accomplished something. They're never able to become a true individual. They're never able to exhibit their true creativity, what it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them for. Because, brothers and sisters, sure, there's some level of creativity that we can get to on our own, but if you really want to become an individual, a person who exhibits something unique, that's worth mentioning, recording in history, saying that this is an example for other people, then the only way we're going to get there is if we're taken there by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not going to get there on our own. Just to see if I can explain this with an example, I just want to share with you an incident from my life. I used to play, or I still play tennis. I'm a tennis player. And I also like to play table tennis as well. Okay? And I remember in my freshman year in university, when pressure would be building up and want to take a break from all the studying, we would go and play table tennis, because they have table tennis in the dorm. So one time I remember, so I used to think that I was a pretty good player, okay, because I played tennis and I knew how to do the backhand with the spins and everything. I even could do a backhand top spin, which is a bit rare. So one time, okay, I was playing, I was doing pretty well, and then somebody comes in who lived in the dorm. He was a Stanford tennis player. He was on a tennis team. And we said, okay, why don't you play? And we thought, okay, fine, like he'll play and he'll probably beat us, but because he's an athlete, but we thought, okay, we could still kind of play a good game with him. But I remember that the whole time I played with him, not a single time did he ever use a forehand. The whole time he was just with a backhand. Not a single time did he ever even try to hit it hard. But he didn't miss a single time. Anything that I would give to him, he would just deflect it. And he soundly defeated me. I didn't have a chance. Okay. Now, what I realized from this, the reason why I shared this story with you, is that because I was an amateur, I was somebody who just kind of learned on my own. Basically, I was in a different league. I mean, this guy was just, without even trying, without even breaking a sweat, he soundly defeated me. And the reason is because he was a trained athlete. He was somebody who had spent time under coaches and was training every day. He had gone through the system. And as a result, he was basically it wasn't even it wasn't even fair for me to play with him, because it must have been embarrassing for him to even play with me. The point is, brothers and sisters, if we're not trained properly, we can't match with those who are trained. So going back to the example of somebody who chooses a path other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and says, okay, I want to become an individual in my own way. Well, you're going to be like somebody who's, this amateur who's kind of just swinging his tennis, or table tennis racket, and hitting it here, hitting there. But if you want to go the right way, you have to be trained. You have to be taken there. And when you're taken there, which is the path of Islam, the path of submission, the path of obedience, then you'll see how you flourish. Then you'll see how you're able to be a flower in that garden that we talked about. Everyone else may be thorns, but you are a flower. Let me just share with you, it's the night of the Quran, the revelation of the Quran. Let me just share with you a few examples we have from the Quran, and then inshallah we'll end the speech. For example, there are some people who feel that they are going to be creative individuals by being singers. They think that their path to fame and their path to becoming this known, famous individual is by singing. And so they their biggest goal in life is to be part of American Idol or something like that. Alright. Now, is that admirable? Is that admirable, or is this admirable? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah SABA, verse number 34, verse number 10, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ مِنَّا فَضْلًا يَا جِبَالُ أَوِّي بِهِ وَالطَّيْرَ وَأَلَنَّا لَهُ الْحَدِيدِ. We certainly gave Dawood, the Prophet Dawood, a grace from us, and we said, "O mountains and birds, sing with him." Sing with him. Nabi Dawood had that ability. He exhibited that individual expression of perfection, such that when he would rise and start worshipping Allah, he would sing the munajat. He would be singing the whispered prayers and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And at that point, the entire mountain range and the birds would come and join and sing with him. Now that's what I call an expression of individuality. Some people are proud of the knowledge that they gain. They get degree after degree after degree, and they say that, okay, now I become a person. Now that's good, that's necessary, we need to become educated. But is that admirable, or is this admirable? Surah Kahf, Surah 19, verse number 65, about Khidr. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فوجد عبدا من عبادنا آتيناه رحمة من عندنا وعلمناه من لدنا علما. That they found Nabi Musa and Yusha ibn Nun, they come across a servant from among our servants. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes pride in this Khidr. He says he's one of our servants. Abdan min ibadina. He's from among our servants. And what is the quality of this person? How has he exhibited perfection? آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِنْ عِنْدِنَا. We gave him mercy from among ourselves, and we taught him our special knowledge that lies with us. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking with the royal we, it doesn't mean that he's more than one. It's indicating the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's speaking with a royal sense. This is somebody who was educated from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, given knowledge of Allah from Allah. That's what I call special. A couple more examples.